In the last lesson, I showed you the simplest way to start an adventure game programming in Object Pascal with Lazarus, namely one room. If you haven't watched that video, go back and watch it. Now in this lesson, I'm going to move on to linking rooms together so that we've got an actual game that you can move around. You can see here it is. So I can go around the map with all the rooms linked together. Now this is once again a code along lesson, so I'll show you every step that I take and you can follow along with me. This is all using the free Lazarus IDE and the Object Pascal language, so be sure to download that, watch the previous lesson, and let's get started. This is the code as I left it in the last video. It creates a room object, then it laboriously sets the values of the various fields. It would be better if we could set those field values when the object is created, and to do that I need to write a constructor method. Let's do that now. So I go to my room unit. This is the room unit as I wrote in the previous lesson, and I need to, in the definition of the room class, I'm going to add the constructor. So down here I enter constructor, and it's got to be called create. That's the standard constructor name. Now I need to add some fields, some parameters here to set the values of the internal fields. So I've got a name and a description. These are the names of the parameters, the values that will be received by the constructor. Those are both of the type string. So I can put them separated by commas, then a colon, then the data type. Now I've got some more parameters which are not of string data type. So I put a semicolon, and these are the integer values of the directions. So you can be typing along with me if you're following in Lazarus. And these are of type integer, so colon, integer. And now I need to add some executable code. This has to be down here under the implementation section. Now to save time, I can use the Lazarus code completion with the constructor section created up here. I press Shift, Control C, Shift, Control. I hold those two down together and C. And you can see that it's automatically written this code down here to match the constructor declaration that I added up here. So I now need to assign the values of each of the parameters that I've declared to the corresponding field. Let me do that first of all with name. So the field is called name, so I put name colon equals, and then the name of the parameter, which is a name. And let me save some time. I'll just add in the rest, and you can pause the video if you want to follow along and add in those assignments. And there it is. And finally, since the constructor has the same name, that's create, as the standard constructor for all objects, it will in effect hide the standard objects constructor. But that does important work when creating objects, so I need to call it explicitly, and I'll do that now down here. And I put the word inherited, and create. Okay. And now I could go back into the project file, that's the one with the LPR extension, and add some more code, but I really want to keep the code in that startup file as simple as possible. So what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to create a new unit that contains the startup code of my game. To add a new unit, I select File, and then New Unit. So there you go. So that's my new unit. And I want to save it. File, Save, or Save As. And I will put the name game unit, just for simplicity. And save. Okay, and it's renamed the unit up here. And now I need to create the game class. Just as when I created the room class in the last lesson, I define the class as a type. That's up here. So I'll just put it here under the users section, and type is the keyword, and then I put the name of my class, game, equals, single equals, class Press enter and Lazarus finishes that off, an empty class definition with end. Now, the really important thing here is that I have an array that's a sequential list of room objects, and that's going to be the map of the game. And so let's add that. So map is the name, and colon, its type is an array. Array, square brackets, giving the indexes of the array. Well, it would go from 0 dot dot to 3. That's 4 rooms, 0, 1, 2, and 3. And I have to say it's an array of what? Of room. The thing I need to do here is I need this to use the room unit. So it gives me access to the room that I've already defined. Room unit. And by pressing Control Space when you're entering these sort of identifiers, Lazarus will pop up suggestions as it did there. Okay, so here's my empty game class. Now I've got a map there, I need a position for the player. Now I'll call it pos, position, POS, colon, and the type will be integer. It's going to reference the number, the index of a room in the array. Well, one other thing is I'm going to make these private. I don't really want people messing around in my class by getting at this data directly. So by marking it as private, it makes sure that I can only access these fields from in this unit. And I also want some public methods, some methods that can be called on an object. Well, I'm going to have a procedure look that will show the description of the object. Procedure init, that's going to initialize the game, and finally a constructor, which again is called create. To fill this in, keeping my cursor up here, I'm again going to use the automatic code completion. Shift, Control, hold those two keys down, press C, and Lazarus has filled out the blank, the empty procedures for me down here. Now in the constructor, I'm going to call my inherited constructor as before. Inherited create. That's the one that creates the basic object. Then I'll call my init function. That's the one that I've declared up here, but I haven't actually done anything with it yet. So let's write some code for the init function. First, I'll set the player's position, pos, that's the integer variable, pos equals 0. So the player is going to start off in room index 0. Now I need to create 4 rooms to create the map for my game. And I put those into the map array. So I start off by creating each room, calling the room constructor. That's room dot create, Control Space, gives me the pop-up automatic code fill-in prompt. And this time I want to put in some actual data for a room. Now if I go back to my room class, you can see that the constructor requires a name and a description, which is strings, and then 4 integers for north, south, west, and east. So that's what I need to fill in here. So I need to put a name, let's call it troll room, a description, what shall I call it? A smelly cave. Remember that in Pascal, the string delimiter is a single quotation mark, as I've used here, and then the 4 exits, -1 for north, well, that means it's no exit, then south, and then no exit, and exit to room 1. But now I need to put this room object somewhere, so I'm going to put it in the map. How do I do that? Map 0, that's getting index 0 of the map, equals, and then it just creates the room and puts that room at position 0 in the map array. Now to save time, I'm going to just fill out the details for the rest of the rooms. Okay, so I've done that now. So I've got 4 rooms at the 4 indexes in the map array, 0, 1, 2, 3. If you want to follow along and you want to add those rooms in your own code, pause the video and do that. And you can see I've also added comments up here so that I can remember which exit each of these numbers represents. Okay, so I now need the look method up here. So look is when I'm in a room, I want it to display the name and description. So I'm going to write a line with a carriage return. That's calling the write ln procedure in Pascal. You are in the space plus, and then I'll get the room at a position given by the pos variable, which is an integer, dot. Now I want to get the description. Get description is a function I've already declared, so I'll select it from the list, and I put a full stop at the end. Just to remind you, if you can't remember what we did in the last video, get description just returns of room, returns the name and the description. So fairly straightforward. Now I need some procedures to move the player from room to room according to what command has been entered. So procedure N will obviously move to the north. And let me just fill in the others quickly. Okay, so again, if you want to pause and write those declarations in your own code, do so now. I'm going to fill out the actual code implementation details again with Control-Shift-C, and it's created these empty methods down here for me. So let's suppose the player has entered a command to move north. I know that I can get the current position, that's given by the pos variable, and I can index into the map array, as I've already shown, to get the room object at that index. So to move north from the current room, I need to look at its n field. The n field is the number indicating the room, as we've seen from this definition of room, the room at its north exit. So if I'm in room 2, for example, the value of n will be 0 because room 2 moves north to 0. By the way, when you're doing this sort of thing, it's useful to draw out a little map on a piece of paper with all the rooms numbered so you can work out which exit goes to which direction. So let's go back and let's add that here. So in the end procedure here, I'm going to find the room at whatever index of the map is given by the player's current position. That's the pos variable. And then I just want to find what room is on the north exit. So that's given by n. So to change the player's position, all I need to do is do pos equals, and then get the room number at the position n. But before doing that, I really need to do one more test. I've already said that some rooms have no exits in certain directions, and I indicated that by -1. So I really need to put the test here. If map pos n equals, single equals -1, then, and then display a message, write in no exit. Otherwise, and that's else in Pascal, else change the position. Well, I'm actually going to change the position and display a description of the new room. So I'm going to put a begin end block around here. Begin end, so that all this will execute if the value is not -1. And to display the room, I'm just going to call it the look procedure. And here's the finished procedure. Now I've reformatted the code a bit so that it looks easier to understand by indenting the lines of code inside the begin and end and so on. And to save time, I've also now added exactly the same code for each of the other directions. The only difference is when I move south, of course, I get the S value and I change the position according to the number indicated by S. For newcomers to Pascal, I should point out that it doesn't matter whether the identifiers, the variables and so on are uppercase or lowercase, because Pascal is a case-insensitive language. They work the same way, which is relatively unusual for programming languages. Right, so I've got all those procedures set up. What next? Well, I now need a main loop. That's what's going to execute when the program starts, and it'll carry on executing throughout the game until I finish. So once again, I need to declare it up here. So I'll just call it procedure main loop. And once again, I'm going to use Control-Shift-C to fill out the empty procedure there. Now it'll be a bit long-winded if I wrote all the code line by line, so I'm going to cheat. I'm going to fill it all in by cutting and pasting one that I wrote earlier. So this is the main loop, and what it does is it declares a char called input, and it has a repeat loop. This repeats until this condition is met. Well, the condition is input equals Q. So when the player enters the character Q, that means quit. Otherwise, the player will enter one character at a time. This very simple game only accepts one character input. And if that character is N, then it calls the game's N procedure, which we've just written up here. And we know how that changes the position of the player if there is an exit. If not, it displays there is no exit. So the case statement is a way of testing the value of input. It's like switch case in some other languages. So it says when input has the value N, then call this method when it has S, and so on. So it calls each of those methods according to what the value of the character is. Unlike some other languages, I don't have to put break after each of these case statements to stop the others executing. That's automatically done in Pascal. As soon as one match is made, the case block will exit. And that goes on until Q is entered. Right at the end, I enter readlin. That reads a line. I've just put it there to pause the game until I press enter. Let's see if everything works. Right. I need, of course, to create the game. Now, what you see here in the LPR file, that's the project file that starts up your program. This is what's left over from the game that I started developing in the previous video. Well, it's no longer relevant because I'm not creating one room, I'm creating a game object. That's an object based on the class game, which we've just been developing. And I don't need all this stuff down here. I just want a method that runs the game. So let's put it in its own procedure up here. Procedure run game, and I'll put the game variable inside that procedure, put end at the end, beginning at the beginning, and now I'm ready to write the code that will start the game. So all I've got to do is create the game object, G equals game. That's my game class. It's constructor method, create, and then run the main loop, which I've just written, G main loop. Right, and of course, this is the code that first runs. All I do here is call the run game method, of procedure rather, and I think I'm ready to go. Make sure that you've got the room unit and the game unit. That's the code units that we've created previously in the users section up here, and I think I'm ready to go. Let's try it. And this time the game is running, so let's try south. You are in, yes, south again, no exit. North should be back to where I started. And let's check, look, south again in the dome, east again, should be no exit, and Q to quit. So there you are, that's the fundamentals of programming an adventure game using Pascal with the free Lazarus IDE. Lazarus is great for not only programming on Windows, as I've shown it here, but also cross-platform. I've shown other videos explaining how, for example, to develop on Windows and then deploy it on a Raspberry Pi, recompile it, and you can do that with visual or command line. Visual, I mean buttons and all sorts of text entry fields, visual and command line programs. If you're interested in Lazarus, look at my Lazarus playlist. If you want to know more about the principles and theory of programming adventure games in whatever language you want to, look at my other series which I've got a very, very detailed series about programming adventure games, mostly shown in C# and Java, but you can apply the principles as I have here to other languages. Hope you've enjoyed this. Make sure you don't miss any more videos that I upload by subscribing and clicking the bell, and I'll see you soon with something completely different.